Don't you know, it is getting hard.
Hey guys, and welcome to Live Coding, a JavaScript poll app with Chris and Alex. And you might be asking yourselves, who is Alex? Well, Alex, otherwise known as Alex Booker, runs a YouTube channel where he covers a lot of back-end as well as web development tutorials that are really well put together. I'm a big fan of his videos, and I'm glad that we were able to do this series together. So how this is going to work is I'm building the client side of the polling application, and Alex has already made the API. You can check out the video where he gives you a step-by-step tutorial and shows you exactly how he did it on his channel, and that's live right now. So go check it out, like, subscribe, and comment on his YouTube channel. I know you won't be disappointed. So what we're going to be doing in this video is building out the client side and linking that API that Alex built for us. What we're going to be using is React, React Router, Webpack, and many other tools to achieve this. So the coolest part about all this is all the code's already on GitHub. So if you guys go down to the description below and click the link, go ahead and clone the repository and start adding new features, updating the UI, which it probably does need updating, and start playing around with it. And if you guys do a pull request, me and Alex might even push the code onto the real site. The application is already online at andvote.com. You could already go on, create polls, send them to friends, break things, and let us know about it. So just go ahead and go to that URL and check it out and see all the other awesome polls that you guys have made. And again, before we get started, I highly recommend you guys check out Alex's video beforehand. That way you aren't as lost and you can see exactly how he built out the API if that's something you're interested in. The link's right there. I'll leave you guys to it. Let's get started. To get started, I'm going to take a look at the GitHub repository right here. I can see that Alex made an initial commit a couple days ago, and he included a few things such as the server file, eslint.json, which I'll explain a little bit more in detail in a couple seconds. And then package.json with some basic packages here. I can see them such as some Babel setup, Express, MySQL, and Sequelize. I know Alex is a big fan of that, and it's Sequelize I'm just getting used to, but I really like it. And then a README that has everything detailed in terms of the API and the server side. We can see here about creating a poll, reading a poll, and voting on a poll, which is the main functionality of our application. I'll go ahead and copy this link right here and do a git clone. And I'll cd into that directory and start the installation process of our node packages. This will take a few seconds, so in the meantime, what I'm going to do is open up a separate tab, open up Sublime or Atom inside of another file. This is going to take a few seconds. For some reason, Atom's been taking a little while to open up. I'm going to have to look into that, but it does indeed open up. And what I'm going to examine is just kind of the server side. I have a general idea of what I want to achieve with this, the setup. You'll see here the first part of this video, I'm going to be configuring Webpack, which configuring Webpack's not any fun, but once it's set up, it's really, really useful, especially since we're using React, and Webpack and React pretty much go hand in hand. I looked up this basic boilerplate, which is a Webpack Express boilerplate by Christian. Huge shout out to him. He did a great job with this boilerplate, and it's got a lot of stars, and it's pretty well known. But more importantly, we can see that he has a full Webpack config that we're going to be kind of mimicking and looking up and choosing some of that code. And also he has this thing known as hot middleware that he's utilizing for the server side. That way he can run the server and the Webpack compiler at the exact same time, which is going to be very useful for our case. Okay, so this is running already. What I'm going to go ahead and show you is I'll do an npm run start, and there's one thing that I'll need to do right here. Alex went ahead and let me know ahead of time he forgot to take something out, so I think that was in the poll controller, or actually in the vote controller. He's throwing an error right here, which I think he meant to take that out, so I'll just go ahead and save that so we won't run into that error later on down the road. We'll go over here to localhost 3000 slash, I think it's, let's go see what he has written down in the documentation, slash poll, and then poll ID, so we're going to look up. But you'll see here, if I paste this in there and do a poll ID, it's going to give me an internal service error. That's because we don't have any poll information set up yet. We can see there's no data value of null. We can easily set this up by doing something known as Postman. What Postman is, you can go ahead and post, delete, update, pretty much test all of your API endpoints from this really nice user interface. I use it all the time for testing APIs and getting some mock data or seed data in there. You can see here, I already have a basic question that Alex actually included in the documentation. So I'm going to send this content type as JSON, and I'll create that. And we'll see if I go back over here and I refresh, we have that in the database. So I'm going to make another question. Who is the best YouTuber? I don't know, I'm just making it up. Who is the best YouTuber? We'll put dev tips, probably him. Actually, Alex Booker, that's a good guy. Then dev coffee, which is me. And then I'll just throw in level up tuts there. Okay, perfect. That way we have a couple polls to work with. And I'll create that. And if I go over here to the second endpoint, we'll see that that is in the database very nicely. Okay, so I'm going to close up Postman. And what we're going to get started on now is we need to make that Webpack config that we were talking about. So to get started, we're going to right click on here and create a new file. This file is going to be known as webpack.config.js. We're going to have to install a few packages to get started. Luckily, what I went ahead and did is I wrote out the packages that I knew we were going to need for our development. We'll see here that we need Webpack, we need HTML Webpack plugin. I'll just go ahead and list these off as I install them. So let me do it sudo npm install and go down the list. So Webpack is the first one. Obviously, we're using Webpack, so we're going to need that dependency. Then Webpack, or HTML Webpack plugin. I'll explain that here in a second. Babel loader for basic, compiling of our JSX in ES 2015. Then a preset for ES 2015, then a preset for React. Then we'll do finally the hot middleware and the dev middleware. I think I got that backwards, but that's good. Let me just make sure this is correct. And I'm going to save this as a dev dependency since it's going to be used in development. And there we go. And that'll take a few seconds to get started. But while that's running, what we can go ahead and do is include different things that I know that we need. First, we're going to need to import path, require path. This comes baked into Node. Then what I'm going to have to require is Webpack. And then finally what I'll do is, I think it's called HTML. Let me see what exactly it was called. I'll pull this notepad up again. I guess I could probably look in the package.json. Okay, so it's HTML Webpack plugin, HTML Webpack plugin. There we go. HTML Webpack plugin. Okay, that's going really well. And what we'll have to do now is start the basic configuration. So to get that started, we're going to do module.export, and it'll export an object. If you've ever done any configuration, this is how you pretty much do it for Webpack in general. And I don't know a lot of this off the top of my head. What I'm going to do is go ahead and click on Webpack config on this boilerplate and kind of copy some of the code. The first thing we're going to do is the first property is going to be dev tool, and then put source map eval. I'm not even sure what that means. I probably should. Then make an entry point. Now this entry point is going to be the exact same here, but we're going to change it for our application on the second line. This is pretty much just saying, hey, use the hot middleware and reload every time there is a change. And then we're going to do path.join, reference our directory name for our project, and we're going to make an entry point. I'm not going to name it the same thing as this because I'm going to actually make our entry point the router that we're going to create. So it's going to be client react or router.jsx, which let's go ahead and create those files. That way we can do it as we go. I'll create a new folder called client. That way we separate our server side and our client side. And in here, I'll make two new files. The first one's going to be router.jsx. And I'm not going to start with filling this out now. I just want to have it there. And the next thing we're going to make, and this is something that we're going to use the HTML Webpack plugin for, is index.tpl, which is short for template.html. This is going to be our template HTML file. That way we can put things in like our CSS. You know, let's say we wanted to configure SCAS and we wanted to inject some basic CSS there, or if we wanted to import Bootstrap, which is probably what I'll do, just give it some base styling or anything else we'd want to include, such as headers or different heads, a title tag. And actually, we'll configure this now. We'll make a doc type of HTML. And then HTML, just going to be a basic HTML setup. I'm not sure, in Sublime, I can basically do a shortcut that does all of this for me, or a lot of the setup for me, but I'm not sure how to do it in Atom. So then I'll do, close this head tag out. I'll just put a title, which will be and vote, or I'll call it the cool thing. And vote. I guess that's a short, or that's the correct way to do the ampersand. Then I'll make a body. Over here, all this body is going to have is, and if you've ever done anything with React, it needs an entry point to kind of bind that router and your HTML together. So you can reference that by ID and kind of bind them together. What I'm going to do here is I'll just make an ID called app. It's very generic, and then I'll close this out. Perfect. Wow, I'm doing a lot of typos. The last thing that I want to do is, like I said, I want to get the Bootstrap CDN. That way we have a base style that we can do, and we can do use a basic grid system as well. Okay, let me go to link. There we go. All right, so that's pretty much set up. Let's continue our configuration for Webpack, and we'll go back over here and look at this. The next thing we're going to need is an output. This output is going to take a path, and then we're going to do path.join underscore dir name, and then it will basically make a folder that at runtime it'll create, which will be known as a distribution folder, which is short for DIST. Second, it'll need a file name. It looks like there he put a template file name, but I can call this index.js, and then a public path, which will just be that \. Perfect. Now we'll start with configuring our plugins. Here's where we'll use that HTML Webpack plugin. So I'll make a new instance of that, Webpack plugin. And over here for the configuration, it's going to take an object, and it takes several things. First off, that template that we just set up. So we'll go client-index.tpl.html. Then we'll inject into the tag body. So that's our inject point for our JS at runtime. So for, you know, our JSX and whatever the router spits out, and then a file name, which will be the actual name of what we'll call it in the distribution folder, and it'll be index.html. Fantastic. We got a few other modules here. I'm just going to copy these over. They're pretty self-explanatory. For instance, the error one will not allow Webpack to run if there are any errors, the hot replacement plugin, and then an occurrence order plugin. And you'll notice that I'm leaving out this Webpack define plugin, which is basically just defining a environment variable for Node. That's because we're only going to have one type of configuration. You know, we can split it into a production and into a regular development config, but I feel like that's a little bit overkill for what we're trying to do. Second thing we're going to do, and the final thing, is we're going to define our loader. You can define multiple loaders here, like I could define less or Sass or, you know, different types, and maybe even TypeScript if you wanted to get that technical. We can define different types of loaders, but we're only going to define one type of loader. And over here, test, and I'll just copy this right here. How about that? That'll be easy. And then I can just put what I need. Copy that, boom. I'll need to format that a little bit better. And you'll notice here, guys, and I didn't point this out earlier, because there's no space between there, is you'll see that there's these different errors that are just popping up. What we're using is ESLint, and what ESLint does is it allows us to code in a consistent manner. You might notice that I'm not putting any semicolons, because that's part of what we agreed on. We went through with a standard setup for ESLint, which doesn't allow semicolons, and it will throw an error. Another thing that it doesn't like is single quote. It likes single quotes instead of double quotes here. You can see it'll have me change those, which I'll change that to them right now. Just so if you see me doing anything stylistic that's maybe different from what you do, that we're doing it from convention. It doesn't like trailing spaces, so I'll just delete these trailing spaces out. And I'll continue with my configuration. So we're not going to be doing JS, we're going to be doing JSX. This exclude is good, that way it doesn't compile any of our node modules. Our loader will be Babel. But over here, we're not going to have stage 0 or React HMRE. We're just going to have React and ES 2015. And then it'll have to have a line at the end because, again, that's part of the ESLint. And that looks like it's nice and set up here. Now what we'll have to do is go over to our server file and go to our app.js. This is where we're going to define our hot middleware. That way, on runtime, this will serve up our Webpack configurations. I'll check out his server.js, and I'll see here that he has an if is developing. Again, he set up a kind of a developer and a production configuration. We're just going to have that one configuration, so we're not going to need that if statement there. So I'll copy this over. And it looks like that let's go ahead and get our dependencies in there first. So I'll import Webpack from Webpack. Again, same deal. Import Webpack, and I'll just copy these over. There we go. So we have a regular middleware, and I need to change this up. Yeah, I'll change that to import, and I'll just do this from, and then get rid of that close parentheses. Perfect. And this is all going to say that this isn't being used. Again, another thing with ESLint is that it tells you if something's defined but not used. It's kind of redundant and pointless to define it that way. So over here, I'm going to start the basic configuration. In something that I'll notice that'll be a problem is I need to go up one directory because I'm inside the server folder. Go up one directory, and then that will actually target our webpack.config. Over here, I'll make a constant called compiler, and that'll be Webpack, and pass in the config. And I'll just copy this over. What you'll see here, I'm just referencing our Webpack middleware, passing in that compiler, which is doing our Webpack config, and then it takes basic configurations here in an object form where we specified that public path for the output file in the distribution folder. That's right there. So that's pretty much what that's doing there. I'm not going to go into too much detail. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to have to define this different path. You'll see that it does app.use middleware, app.use webpack hot middleware. We can just copy this over. And under here, where Alex defined his endpoints for the API, I can define what we have for our application. I'll get rid of all the semicolons. There we go. Perfect. And it does like spaces behind our function calls. All right. We'll see here. That makes a whole lot of sense. I don't know if I need to change anything. Maybe, okay, since that's referencing the dir name, I don't have to change this path. That will be consistent. And there we go. I think in terms of our setup with Webpack, we're pretty much done. The next steps we have to do is set up React Router. Let's do that. First, we're going to start with installing a few dependencies, and these are just going to be regular dependencies, not dev dependencies. We'll do sudo npm install React, React DOM, and React Router, and then save that. Okay, and while that's going, I'll go ahead and import what I need, and then I'll import render from React DOM, because we're going to need to render to our template. And then I'll take out a few things from our React Router. I've done a lot of React Router in like React setup, so I know a lot of this off the top of my head. First thing we're going to need is the router, the route, the index route. I guess it's a Pascal case. And then, yeah, browser history. For whatever reason, the convention is to have this camel case and then all of these Pascal case, because I think these are JSX components technically by definition. Now we'll actually define our route setup. So I'll make a constant called root route. Set that equal to JSX object here, or not JSX object, but just, a bunch of JSX. Start with defining my router. I'll give it that browser history. So history is going to be equal to that browser history that we pulled out. And then we can define a route. Now what this is going to be is it's going to have the path of just backslash. That way, whenever you go to localhost 3000, it'll be right there. And this is what we'll actually call our layout. We'll make our layout component right here. This is where you typically put it. And now I'll make a ton of children from this route. Make a ton of children, that sounds kind of bad. But I'll start with the index route. And all this needs is a component, which, again, like we talked about earlier, we're going to have 3 different types of views. We're going to have create a poll, vote on a poll, and the result of a poll. Well, the backslash, so the home route, the index route, is going to be the CreatePoll component. Because as soon as you go to our URL, we want to have that create poll there. So we'll pass in a CreatePoll component and then close that out. And let's see what the issues are here. Okay, it's because these two aren't defined. We can go ahead and define those in a second, but let's finish the rest of this configuration. So now I'll render the root route, and then I need to reference this div right here. Now the best way to do this is just by doing document.getElementById and then typing in the ID. Let me format this a little bit better. There we go. Get rid of that. So we're ready to rock with this. The only thing we need to do is create these components. What I like doing to keep kind of a general structure and make it very scalable is I make a new folder called modules. And inside of modules, I make subfolders to define what that module is. For instance, I'm going to make a shared folder. And what this will include is things like the nav bar, the footer, the layout, the not found page, things that are very general. And then as I start adding different things, let's say we wanted a login feature, I would make an account folder. But what I'm going to have is a poll folder. This is where we'll keep all of our polling components and our styles. And later on, we could have, we could split it up into containers and actions. But we're not going to get that in depth. We're just going to have the component there with all of the logic. I'll make a new file and call this layout.jsx and define my component. Import React and then do class layout extends react.component. And over here, I guess I'll just render. I'll just give this a class name to test out our bootstrap that we loaded earlier. And I'll just say h2 layout. That way we have some visual feedback that's working. Let's see what the error is here. Okay, yeah, it does like single quotes. Again, I'm gonna have to get used to that. And then I'll do a module.exports layout. That way I can pull it in the other file. And okay, I'll save this. And then I'll basically copy this and do the exact same thing, but just change the name over here in the poll file. So CreatePoll.jsx, save it, paste it, and then just change this name to CreatePoll. Perfect. Now all we have to do is import those components. So I'll import layout from, and then I'll reference the modules-shared-layout.jsx. There we go. And then I'll import CreatePoll from modules-poll-createpoll.jsx. All right, that was a lot of testing and not a lot of testing, no testing whatsoever, but a lot of writing code and no testing. So we can go ahead and test now. You might see that this is red up here. Something that is an issue with ESLint that we noticed is, for instance, you can see we're clearly using router and route here and index route, but it's giving us an error that it isn't defined, although it is. I guess it just doesn't sense whether or not the JSX is actually being used. Something that we're just going to ignore for right now, but in the actual project, we'd probably try to find some type of configuration. All right, for the moment of truth, I'm going to do npm run start. This will run our server, which in turn will run our Webpack hot middleware. Whew, okay, that is amazing if that actually worked. Okay, something that I just realized before I refresh this is what we need to do here, because this is going to throw an error. Let me show you. This should throw an error. There we go. You'll see that doesn't necessarily throw an error, but it's not giving us our desired result. We have our layout here, but we do not have our CreatePoll right there. That's because this layout actually contains that component. This, and I'll just console.log this, which is going to reference that component. And you'll see here if I go to props and children, it will have that component CreatePoll. So what we'll do here is content is equal to this dot props dot children, and then I'll put that right there. Define it, and if all things go good, perfect. Okay, so we'll see our CreatePoll is right there. We got that working, but what we want to do now is create our other 2 routes that we're going to have, and actually it's going to be 3, but I'll tell you what I mean in a second. Let's make another file called VotePoll. This will be the component where we vote on our poll. Then we'll make an additional one called ResultPoll, which again, you guessed it, it'll be the results of our poll. I'll copy this over and then just change this name to, I guess it's ResultPoll. And something else, I'm going to take this container off because the container's already on the layout, which I'll probably style it a little bit better here in a little bit. It's going to look really kind of bad for until the end. That's when I'm going to do all the styling. Then this is called VotePoll. And I'll also take this class name off. That's saved. I'll go over here to our router and then import those 2 modules. This will be called, I guess we'll do VotePoll first. And this will throw an error real quick, but I'll fix it. And then this will be called ResultPoll. And I'll make 2 additional routes. Now, since the index route references whatever the home route is, we're going to actually have to start specifying specific routes. I kind of was seeing what would be the most appropriate name for what we're doing. I came up with just doing V and R for vote, short for vote and result. That way when people are copying and pasting the URL, it's just really short and it still makes a little bit of sense. So I'll start with the vote path, and then I'll give that a component of VotePoll. Copy paste this, make this R, and then this will be ResultPoll. There we go. Okay, so you'll notice if I go to -R, it'll give me an internal service error. We'll find out why here in a second. Why is that? Still found something. Wow, okay. This doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So let me show you the error that I found. So I had it just like this, right? And what this should be referencing is my root directory name, which gets created when Webpack runs. And that would be right here at the root of my project. But for some reason, it doesn't like it unless you specify the actual route in the join, which doesn't make sense because that would make it pointless for us to do dir name. I'm not sure why it wants that. Maybe it's just a mess up on my end, but it seems to work after I did do that. So if you guys got any idea why I have to specify the exact route from here, let me know because I'm kind of at a loss for words with it. All right, moving on. And it's good. We get errors like this in development and we just kind of push through them. I didn't expect that to happen, but we got it working, and I did a couple tests and it ended up working. So what we want to do now is several things. We could start with, let's go ahead and get our poll information. Like I said, and I'll open this on the other file right here, API/poll/1. We'll just do the first poll. Let's start with getting this information and displaying it on our result. Since the result isn't going to change, pretty much all the result is going to be is just a screen that shows you. And we'll add a little bit more logic. So we'll do a component. If you're not familiar with React's lifecycle methods, just go ahead and look those up. Component did mount, or component will mount. I think component will mount would be the appropriate one to do here. And I'm going to need to install another dependency. What I'm going to be installing is, you guys might have heard of it. I don't know, it's not that big of a deal. It's called jQuery. There we go. I'll start with importing that. Yeah, jQuery, it's a brand new thing apparently. It just came out and people are just now using it, I guess. Anyways, I'm going to be using the AJAX call from there. Actually, specifically what I could use is the get call from jQuery because it's more specific and it's a shorter way of doing it. So I could do that. All I need to pass in is the URL. Then it has a callback function, and I think it has, yeah, it has a fail and alert. That way if anything messes up. Okay, perfect. We'll go over here and we'll set this equal to this.server handler. And I'll show you why here in a second. What we're going to want to do is we're going to want to unmount this request whenever we leave this component. So this server handler will be this.get, or not, $get. And I'll go find that correct path that Alex so kindly gave to us. Copy and paste that. So we'll do a get call. And I guess what we'll have to do, something that I have not set up that I'm going to need to set up, is these don't need to be just /v and /r. These are going to have to reference a poll ID. That way we know what to get. Something I completely forgot. Something else that we'll do here in a second is a not found page, because right now, if we go to this page /v, it's not going to work because /v doesn't exist. /v with a poll ID does exist. All right, go over here to the second part, and this takes a function that I guess it will have some sort of data in there. We'll call this result, and all we'll do is console.log this result out. Before I forget, we'll go up here, and what we're going to need to get is that poll ID. I think is it called poll ID? We'll see what it's called. Yeah, it'll be called poll ID. And let me do this. Let me comment this out and just console.log this. That way I know the exact path for that poll ID. And I'll start with running that and npm start. Okay, so I'll go to my result. And it console.log that out, and I'll go look at it. So it is under this.props.params. Let me zoom in a little bit so you guys can see it. I know it's kind of hard to read. We'll see that it gives us that poll ID. So I'll get that value out. I'll do a const poll ID is equal to this.props.params. And then put that in there as what I'm getting. And instead of me doing the traditional like plus poll ID, I could do that. I'm going to do it the ECMAScript 6 way, or ES 2015 if you want to get technical, where we use the kind of the string formatter, which it's $. So you have to use those kind of different quotations that are kind of diagonal, and then you put in the variable name right there. Well, if I save this, this should give us the information that we're requesting. And it does. We'll see there. Just that was really easy. We got the question and we got the poll options right there inside of our console. But we're not going to just want it inside of our console. We're going to want to do several things. Let's make a constructor where we're going to put this question and poll options. So I'll make a constructor where we can reference state. We'll define our state. And over here, you need to put in a props, and that props needs to do a super to that. There we go. And then this dot state is equal to an object, and we'll start defining. So the first thing we're going to find is question, which will initiate to null. Then we'll do poll options, which would be null. Something else we can do is loading, which would be true. It would initialize it true because as soon as we hit that component, it will be loading. Then an error, which I guess it'll start as false, but if there is an error, we'll equal that to true. And I think that's all we're going to need. I'll put a space there just for consistency. All right. Several things. I'm going to want to get that question and that poll options property out of this object. Oh, I can't copy that. Poll options is equal to result. Not result poll, just result. And over here, I'm going to want to do this dot set state and set my state here. So what I'm going to do is question, and this is using the ES 2015 syntax where basically if the property name and the property is exactly, or the variable are exactly the same, it'll fill that in for you. So this would be the equivalent of doing this question. There we go. All right, so I see question and poll options. Loading will be equal to false since it'll be done loading. The final thing I'm going to want to do here is handle any errors. Luckily, jQuery has this fail promise. So if there is a fail, I can go ahead and respond to it. What I'll do is this.setState, and all it'll be is error will be equal to true. And I guess loading will be equal to false since it won't be loading anymore. Yeah, so either way, loading is going to be equal to false because it's no longer doing that request. That makes a lot of sense. Let's console.log out our state and see what we come back with. Okay, perfect. So we'll see it initializes to our initial value that we set in the constructor, which the question will be null, poll option will be null, loading will be true, and then error will be false. And then over here, we got our question, we have our poll options, and then we have our loading, which is equal to false because we're finished loading, and we don't have an error. You'll see here, I guess if I go to something that doesn't exist, it will say error that's true because we don't have a poll with the ID of 4. Perfect. That's working out really well. All right. Let's start with, first off, we'll make this look a little bit nicer. I'll put a space there, and then I'll put a class name of text-centered. All right, so we just have that in the middle. I'm going to make this layout look a lot nicer here in a little bit. If you guys get annoyed by it, I'll probably take it out shortly. But just know that we're going to be using everything that we're defining. It's just not going to look super pretty at first. Then what we're going to want to do is have the question. Let's put a class text-center. Actually, why don't I just put a text-center on everything? That way it's just all nice and centered and we don't have to worry about it being pushed to the side. We'll want to get our values out of the state. So our question, our poll option. What else? We're going to want to get our loading and our error so we can handle that. And then set up equal this.state. Whoa. Perfect. Over here, we'll put in our question, H4, and then we'll loop through this. We'll just make sure that our question's appearing there. We'll see there, we have our question. I'll make it a little bit more prominent. I can make that look so much better here in a little bit, but we'll worry about that again later. Now what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to sense if it isn't loading and there isn't an error. Because basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to map through those options, and if you're not used to .map, I would just brush up on it really quick. But what I'm going to do is map through those functions or those options and kind of lay them out. To do this, I'm going to make sure that it's not loading, so not loading, and there is not an error. So there's a use case where our state, it's done loading, correct? And it doesn't have an error. Perfect. That way it won't give us any bugs. Something else I'm going to want to do here is I'm going to want to do a component will unmount. I just noticed this right here. component unmount will basically, whenever you leave that component, it will clear out any errors or any server, any server requests that might still be there, and it'll avoid memory leaks. So server handler.abort. There we go. Because it gives it that, basically what it returns is an ID, and I abort that ID that it's given to me. So we're doing a ternary statement here, which is pretty common practice in React. We'll do poll options dot map, and map takes a function. And before I forget, I'll just return null if loading and error are true. In here, I'll put poll option, which goes in the params. I can map through this. So I'll return a div of class name. Actually, I'll give it a style. I'll give it some really dumb looking style. Let's do a border of 1 pixel solid black. That way it looks awful, like in 2000 web development. And we'll see here that, we'll go back to this, see that it has a option ID, a text, and a vote count. So let's pull up those values. You can tell that I really do like destructing inside of ES6. This is exactly what I'm doing here. This is known as destructing. I do this anytime I can. I like seeing it visually laid out, and all the variable names make a whole lot of sense to me. And I'll put in poll option here. All right. Let's start with just, I guess all we have to do is just lay it out. We'll just put a paragraph tag and then put option. We can make this look so much user-friendly later on. I guess this will just be ID. This will be option. Put text in there, and then finally the votes. How many votes we got? I'll just copy and paste that vote count right there. All right, there we go. We got our options right there, and look how pretty it looks. That looks perfect. Like, I want to use this poll right now. But in all reality, we'll see that it gives us this error. To avoid this, we're going to want to add a unique key to that, and in map it passes back in an index. And in there, I'll just put keys equal to I, and that shouldn't give me the error anymore. All right, we'll see this is working exactly like we want to. If I go over here to option 2, it loads all of those other options in our other poll. That's working out really well. So now what we'll get started on is actually building out our VotePoll component. Now, there's a few more things we want to do inside of the result poll, like make it look a little bit nicer and have maybe a button to the vote if you haven't voted yet. But we'll do that again after we get finished configuring our vote poll. So guys, the next part we're going to do is go ahead and get our VotePoll component working. You might be wondering, okay, how are we going to set this up? This will be pretty similar to our result poll, except we're going to have the functionality of being able to vote. What I'm going to do here is I'm actually just going to copy this code directly, and we'll see how well this actually ends up turning out. So I got that code directly. I'm going to need to import jQuery. Import $ from jQuery. So it won't give me that error anymore. And then next we're just going to do exactly what we did over here. Let me go back to the result poll, and then I'll do exactly what I did inside of the render function, and I'll grab it all the way. And I'll just change the name to VotePoll. And let me do something else. Something else I can go ahead and do is I'll add a link over here in the result poll. Again, I'm going to do that loading and no error. So if it's not loading and there is no error, then go ahead. And this is whenever I'll actually get what is known as link inside of React Router. What link does is it's very much like an href. It's actually almost exactly like an href, except it has a little bit different syntax. Over here from React Router. Perfect. Go down there, and then in this case, what I'll do is I'll make a link. There we go. And the attribute on there will be 2, and then I can go ahead and put the 2 function right here. Something else that I'm going to do is I'll go ahead and get out the poll option from our params. So it's equal to this dot props dot params. That way I can pass in that ID to the link. So I'll do dash v dash or no, it'll be it'll be vote dash whatever the poll ID is. There we go, and I'll need to put that in the JSX, kind of saying, hey, this is JSX or this is JavaScript inside of here. That's notified by the curly brackets. And we'll check this out. I'll go back to the result. Okay, and then or null. Okay, yeah, I put an equal sign there. That is not what's required. And I'll see why this link isn't registering. So I'm gonna say I'm doing the exact same thing right here, which is peculiar. That link to, I think the vote should be the same. Okay, the vote's actually spitting back the exact same thing as we would expect. That's good. I'm just trying to get a link in here. Let's see the best way to do this. So link to, okay, I didn't put, so vote on the poll, whatever. I'll just give it a really bad name. I didn't actually give it a name. That's why I wasn't saying anything. And let me go back to the result. And we'll see it's right there. Okay, vote on the poll. There's our link. Sorry about that. I was getting a little bit confused. And if I click on it, it will take me to our vote component. Now, our vote component is pretty much verbatim the exact same as our result component. We're going to want to change this up a little bit. First, we're not going to want to include the vote count. We're going to want to include an option, such as a radio button, that you can click on which option and then submit the poll. So let's start with getting rid of this, and we'll see that it reflects the change. And let's add that same link functionality to our vote component, so it'll bring us to so results of poll. I don't know. I'm going to come up with way better naming here in a little bit. And let me import that link from React Router. There we go, and that should work. Poll ID is undefined. That's because we need to make a constant for it. Poll ID. Oh, I put 2 spaces right there. Let me backspace that one more time and set that equal to this dot props dot params. Fantastic, it's working. So you can see I can toggle between the results. Okay, except I need to make this a -r, so it goes to the proper route here, and you'll see it goes to the results and it goes to the vote. It goes to the results, it goes to the poll. So again, let me kind of just reiterate what I just did. What I did was this poll. This vote poll was very empty. It didn't have anything inside of it. It just had that H2 with the vote poll text inside of it. I copied over this code with the constructor, the component will unmount, and all this information, and just kind of copied it over because it's very similar component. The only difference is going to be that radio button to where you can submit the poll. Later on, we're gonna add a little additional functionality that'll make it to where you can't go back to that vote poll if you already voted on that particular poll. All right, fantastic. And it says that vote count isn't used. That's right. We're not going to even need vote count, so we can actually completely take it out of there. Let's start with doing a couple different things. The first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to make an input. This input is going to be of a type of radio. And I'll just save that, and we'll see that this will appear different radio buttons. And maybe let me go to poll 2 since it has more options. We'll see that we have our different options here, but we'll notice that we can select all the different polls. That isn't good. We want to be able to select one and it'll uncheck the other one that we have previously checked. To do that, we add a unique name to it, or not a unique name, a shared name between the different options. Over here, we'll just call this option. And if this refreshes, we'll see that this will change as we click on it. Perfect. The second step we're going to want to do is we're going to want to add a form tag to this. So this form tag, I'm not going to even give it a style. I'm just going to go ahead and put our different options right here inside of our form tag. That way we can submit when we click a certain button. All right, let me, yeah. So I'm gonna space this out a little bit better. I'll make a button. And this button will be of a type submit. That way, anytime we click it, it will submit the form. So I'll call this cast vote. There we go, and this is gonna look nice and awful like we would expect. So it'll refresh the page because by default it does refresh the page. But let's add a little bit of styling to this. First off, I'll start by making it a style of a margin 12. That way it has a little bit of space from that result poll. Perfect. So we have a little bit of delineation between the two. Next, we'll just give it a basic Bootstrap class. Again, I've worked with Bootstrap a lot during the past, so I know a lot of the different syntax for it. And we'll give it a button primary. So it just has that nice big button. Again, we'll make it look a lot better. I know that for a fact. I thought of doing this a lot of different ways. What I could have done is selected this value using jQuery anytime we submit the poll, but I figured that wouldn't be doing things the React way. I figured the best way is we add a value on our state. So we'll add our value option ID checked. So anytime we click one of these checked options, it's going to add that value to the checked. And that makes a lot of sense. So over here, we'll make it on click. This on click will be called, we'll call it this dot, I'm trying to think of a good name, this dot checked option. I don't know, that's probably not a good semantic way, but it'll work for right now. So this, binding to this, will basically just bind it to our current component, and the second parameter in here is what we want to pass through. And you might have guessed it, we're going to pass through the option ID. That way we can set our state to that option ID anytime it changes. I'll just minimize this for the time being, and I'll add that new method that we're going to go ahead and do, which is checked option. Yeah, there we go. Checked option. And this is going to take an ID, and all it's going to do is set the state of option. Let me go ahead and copy this attribute right here. It's gonna set this option ID checked to that ID that we clicked on. That works perfect. So we'll see here, we can't see any visual feedback from this. We can see that it's not throwing error, that's good. But we'll console.log out. Oh, I guess what we can do right here is we can actually just add this to our destruction right here. And maybe it's better if I add some spacing, that way we can better see it laid out, instead of us having it like all kind of crumpled or all like strung out right there. And then I'll console.log that poll option, or poll, it's not poll options, is it? No, poll options is correct. Okay, yeah, I didn't add that, and then I need to check that down. Whoops, okay. And I need to add that to there. Perfect. So when we click on any of these, we should see it change. Okay, we see the ID of 3. This should be the ID of 6. We'll see it right there. Let me zoom in for you mobile users. We'll see 6. We'll see 5. We'll see 4. And we'll see 3. Perfect. So we know that's working, and that's setting our state equal to that ID. I'm sorry, I got a little drink while I got to go. It's late at night, so it's a little pick-me-up. Then we'll see this checked option is working exactly like we want it to. But we're going to want to do several different things. First off, we're going to want to kind of analyze what Alex gave us for our endpoint. So we'll go over here to GitHub, and we'll check and scroll down. And we'll see to cast a vote, what we do is we hit this endpoint API called the vote. And we're going to pass in a JSON object, which is poll option, and then the option of the poll, or the option ID of the poll. That's a good thing. It makes a whole lot of sense. Let's just go ahead and try to figure this out real quick. We'll make a onSubmit here and call this dot cast vote. I think that makes a lot of sense to call it that. And we can make this function. Here, this will accept a event. That way, right now, if you see, I'm not going to save any of the code. I'll refresh this here. Okay, it's giving me an error. Cannot read property. Okay, that's because it didn't define it. There we go. You can see here if I click this, it refreshes our poll, which is not ideal. We don't want to be refreshing things on a single page application unless completely told to. So we'll make event.prevent default. Oh, whoops. Prevent default. We'll go ahead and prevent that for us. So if we click on this, you'll see it's not refreshing. That's really good. Now going back down over here to this, we're going to want to do several things. First, we're going to want to check that this isn't equal to null. So right now I can click this and you know, there's no repercussions. It's not null. Let's pull up that value. Option ID checked is equal to this dot state. And all we'll do for right now is we'll just console.log out that option ID checked. Just to check that you know, we're getting the correct value. I'll click there on 5. If I click there, we'll see that 5 appears. And I'll remove this from our component because we no longer need to test that. Okay, that's good. I guess we don't need to use this here. So if I click that there and nothing's checked, I'll see that it's an empty string like it's initialized right up here. I don't want you to be able to submit anything if you don't have something checked. So what we can do is add an if statement. So if option ID is not checked, so just put that not, we'll alert the user, please select an option. There we go. We'll see that that allows it, but if I refresh and there is no option checked, we get this nice, beautiful, user-friendly alert of please select an option. That works for us. And you'll also notice that I get this alert is not defined. That because during runtime, it attaches that alert to the document. What we can do to prevent this is we can just make a constant called alert and then set it equal to document. And this should work the exact same. Actually, it doesn't work the exact same. I think, is it window? I guess it does have no yeah, okay, so it would be window. So if, like, let's say I wanted to do a, maybe not a console.log, but I wanted to do a local storage. Dot my name is, you know, equal to something or, you know, whatever. It's not going to have any concept of local storage because it's not defined. What I could do here is I can go over here and go to local storage, and then it will be defined. I'm just doing this for linting purposes. Again, it does recognize alert as an actual function, but just to be kind of correct, I'll define a constant that sets alert equal to window. So at this point, we know that the user has selected a valid ID. What you might have guessed is we can now do a HTTP call using Ajax. Now, let me look this up. I'm not completely certain of the syntax off the top of my head of jQuery. So the Ajax call, and I'll just scroll a little bit down because I think it's down here. I'm looking for the configuration. So I know it's a method, it's a URL. Yeah, there we go. A method URL, I can put a data type, and then I'm going to want to put a content type. So I'll configure this to where, actually, first off, I got to set up my data accordingly. So I'll make a constant called data and make it into an object that kind of matches this right here. The name is going to be poll option ID. Although what I could have done, I could have called, you know, it on state poll option ID by default, but I chose not to do that. So let's just roll with this for right now. And I'm going to set, okay, whoops. Did not mean to put it there. I meant to put it right here. Poll option ID is going to be the same as the option ID. So this, if I were to select 4, it would be 4 in that case. Perfect. What I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to stringify it to JSON because this isn't JSON, and then I've also tested it, but this won't work as well. I can put it like this, but that'll be a little bit redundant. But let me make the method, which will be a post. We can see here, again, I'm doing a post call to vote. Then I'll reference the URL, which will be this URL right here. then I'll pass in the data. And again, like I was saying, this is where we stringify it. So we do JSON stringify. This is something that comes baked into JavaScript, is the JSON.stringify method. Option ID. Or, oh no, I would just put data in there, not the option ID. There we go. And then I would need two more configurations. So I need data type is equal to JSON, and then a content type, which will be application-JSON or slash. If I've said dash during this entire process, I apologize. I get those not mixed up, but I just out of habit say dash instead of slash. Perfect. What this will return, it'll return one of two things. It'll return a success call if it is successful, and then it'll return a you already voted on this message if it is not successful. Luckily, over here, Ajax has two separate calls we can do to clarify that. So it has the done call and it has a fail, or promise rather. Let me see where it has a find. Okay, so it has a fail and has a done. So on done, this means that it successfully ran and it successfully posted and was, responded with the appropriate status. And then a fail, or fails, yeah, fail. At this point, I'll just console.log voted. There we go. And here, this will pass back an error function. And I think Alex kind of made it clear right there that it is you've already voted on this poll. So I'll just pass in that error manually and then console.log that error out if that occurs. All right, let's make sure this is good. Okay, it doesn't like spaces behind the block. That's fine. So in theory, if I clicked one of these, which I probably should vote on Alex Booker just because he's probably the best YouTuber out of all these people. JSON.stringify is not a function. Let me go look that up. Maybe did I spell that wrong? Okay, I said stringify. Fight, I don't know. I spelled that incorrect. So I'll go over here, Alex Booker. We'll see that it was created. And let's actually go to our endpoint of 2. And we'll see that it does have a vote count of 1 on Alex. So we were able to successfully vote on that. If I click this again, what do you expect to happen? I would expect that I get that 500 call or that 400 call that says you already voted on this. And we'll see, we did get that 400 and it says you already voted on this poll. What are you doing? That is correct. Let me see if I can do a dot response text. That way I can alert it. Click there, you already voted on this poll. Can I do a dot message? Is that available, or do I have to convert it? Oh, how do I do back to JSON JavaScript? I forgot what the call is. Reverse of stringify. Okay, it's JSON.parse. So let me go ahead and do that. JSON.parse. So I'll parse that. And then I'll get the message, and that should work. There we go. All right, perfect. So instead of doing a console.log, for right now, we'll just do an alert. So over here, I go here. It says I already voted on this. Already voted on this. Let's go to a poll we definitely did not vote on and make sure that we can vote on it. Go to 1. Vim is better. I don't know. It says unaccepted tokens, yeah, position. Okay, that was that an error that I noticed earlier? Huh, where did it hit that? Okay, so this is hitting this parse error here. That isn't good. Let me go ahead and just take this out, and then I'll console.log the error. Let me even see if it created that in general. So it did vote for Vim, but it hit this error function. That isn't good. I think whenever I was kind of playing around with this earlier, it was doing that. That means that it's hitting this fail promise, although it is being successfully responded to. That's why the JSON.parse didn't work, because again, it's parsing something of undefined. What I can do to prevent this let me do something. There's this always command. Let me go look at that for jQuery. Find always. I think I was just at it. Always is a command that it'll always return something. So it'll always return a response. And then I can manually write my own kind of promise here. Where initially, I'll just console.log the data out, right? Because it's responding with an object no matter what. And it will have a response code no matter what. There we go. So you already voted on this. So what I'll do here is I'll do, and let me go ahead and just do destruction. I'll get out the status, which will be 400 if it's not working. Then the response text. And then set that equal to data. So if status is equal to 400, not 4,000, 400, and this needs to have a space behind it, sorry. Whoops. So if the status is equal to 400, what I'm going to want to do is parse out that error message that we get typically. Let me see if that even works. This might throw an error. Yeah, okay, so it is doing that. What I will do is I'll alert. And what I'm going to alert here is the JSON.parse. I'll parse that response text. Like we said, it needs to be parsed. And then I'll parse that message out specifically. So I click there. It's alerting the message appropriately. That's perfect. But something we're going to want to do is we're going to want to return this function. That way it doesn't continue to run the other parts of it. Fantastic. Over here, what we're going to want to do is if it's successful. So if it's successful, it's going to respond with a status of 201. So if status 201, yep. Then what I'm going to do is I need to go ahead and import out the browser history. Let me see if I could have done that over there at the result poll. Yeah, no, that's fine. So I need to get browser history because what it's going to do is it's going to what browser history basically does, if you use Flow Router or Iron Router in Meteor, or for instance like ng route in Angular, it reroutes. That's pretty much React's way of rerouting. So what you do is you push a basic string, which is going to be your URL string. Here we're going to do the result of whatever this is, which I guess it would be poll ID. And did I get poll ID out in this function? Looks like I didn't. So what I would do is I would get the params poll ID here, and then I would pass it in there. That way it redirects to the poll ID that we want it to. And I'll get rid of this console.log. And I guess I'll return with that. Not that, to be semantically correct. So if I do this, it's not going to recreate, but let's go make a new poll. I guess we can get a little bit cheeky with this. What is the best language? Programming language? Here, I guess we'll just put JavaScript. The classic Ruby would be one. And again, I'm making like actual polls that people would probably do in the real world or when they use our application, because hopefully you guys would be not pressured, but there would be some incentive to use this application. And then the last one will be, I guess, just Java. Whoops. And then send that post request. We'll see that it created it. So we'll go to the route 3. And over here, what this should do is it should reroute to the results as soon as we finish voting. I'm gonna throw an oddball. I'm gonna say C# is. There we go. We have one vote on C#. We see that that's working, and the component is 100% good with that. Okay, guys, I've kind of left the most complicated part to last, and that is the create poll. You might be wondering, okay, create poll, that seems like a pretty easy way of doing things. Just send a post request, but we're doing this a special way we want to allow the user to put any number of options. For instance, let's say you have a question with 30 different options. You should be able to do that. How I'm doing this is if you're clicking on the last input and they're, obviously your values are filled out, it will create a new input underneath and then so on and so forth. I'll show you exactly what this means as we build this out. First, we're going to start with something. I thought of the best way to do this, and the way that I came up with is to basically make a for loop that loops through a given number value and creates those different inputs. So let's make a constructor. And again, we're going to have to do the props with super props right there. And then define the state, which we'll call this option count. And option count will just be equal to 2. So we'll initialize it with 2 different options. Then what we'll do is, since we want to split this out, we'll make a method that returns back an array of different options. We'll call this createOptions. And over here is what it does is it takes out that option count. I'm going to go ahead and put that into a constant of this.state. I don't know why it keeps doing that. This.state. There we go. And then we'll do a for loop. Let's go ahead and do for. There we go. We'll do that out there. And we'll just take this. So we want it to loop pretty much as much options as there are. We want it to loop through. And I'm going to do a couple things here. What I'm going to first do is start with creating something called index, which will just be I plus 1. So that way, instead of 0, 1, 2, 3, it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And what I will do, I think I need to make an array. So I'll make an array called options. And it'll just initially be empty. Then over here is what I'm going to want to do is just create that option. Because all I want to do is just get those options there. And let me just, before I forget, this is going to return the options in general. I'll do options.push. Okay, something that might be better is if I make a constant called option or option input. Option input makes a little bit more sense. And what this will be is, again, just an input that is the type of text. And we're going to want to add a few unique values to this. The first one is going to be ref. This is how we're going to reference it later on down the road. And this will be a unique value. And how we do that is we do option, give it the name of option, and then we want to put that variable index there. So initially it'll be option 1, option 2, option 3, option 4, option 5, and it'll kind of keep going as we add on options. The next thing I guess we'll do we want to add an ID or anything similar? I'm trying to think of what else we want to add. I think this is just good. We won't want to add an ID, maybe a placeholder. Please enter a option, or enter an option. That's all I'll do, and I'll space this out a little bit better. Whoops. And then I do notice a problem with this that I'll fix here shortly. This needs to be wrapped inside of curly braces once again. And that should work. Shouldn't break anything. And then what I'm going to want to do at the end of this line is I'll just push that onto our options array. So options.push option input. There we go. Then up here inside of my render function, I'm going to want to do a couple things. First, I'm going to want to make a form. That's pretty much what's going to be holding everything. Each form will have a label. The first thing that's going to have, and this will be absolutely true because everything is a question, and we'll give it input with I guess we'll give it the ref of question, and then a placeholder of enter a question. And just for semantic purposes, I will also give it a type of text, and that should put that right there. Perfect. That looks horrible, but it will do. I'm gonna do my classic thing where I just give it a black border. How about that? Wow, that looks gorgeous. I just want to keep some type of delineation between it. And I'll put a break tag behind it. That way, whenever we start loading these options in. So what I'm going to want to do now is make a constant that holds all of those options. That way, I can put it into our render function. So we'll just make a constant called options and set it equal to this dot create options. And again, since options is just looking at that state, it's going to return an array of the option inputs in the JSX format. I'm trying to think of what I'll need. Okay, I think I'll need a... I don't think I need... Okay, yeah, that's something I'll do. I'll format it a little bit better. Take this out. I want to give this a label just so it has a little bit of a visual cue. And all this will be like is option and then whatever the index is, not options, option, and then I'll give it a break tag. Okay, now I think we're ready to render this. All we have to do is just say options right there, and we'll see that we have all of our different options. Perfect. So we have 1, 2 different options, and then if I change this, let's say I change this to 10, I refresh this. This will now have 10 options. Again, I could do 100 options if I wanted to. This is why I thought this would be the most flexible way of doing things, just because, again, we can add any number of options. Later on, we could even give it a param. Like if it comes in with a parameter of, let's say like 30, we can give it 30 options by default. Let me add something else. This is going to need a unique key, which I'll just give it a unique key of index. Let's see if that works. Yeah, so it's not throwing that error anymore, and then I'll put this back to 2. Fantastic. So we have our create function working perfect, and we have our input. But something like I was telling you guys is what I want to do is I want to be able to click inside of this input, and it creates a new input underneath. But if I go out of it, it doesn't create a new input. It deletes that. But if I have some type of text in there, then it creates a new input. All right. What I'm going to first want to do is make 2 new methods, which it's going to be very simple. I'm going to have a add option method and then a remove option method. And all this is going to do is this is going to set the current state of option count to -1. So whatever the current one is, it's going, or okay, the add one will be do a plus, right? And then this this subtract, or this other one, okay, and let me do this. It'll be this dot state dot option count. And then let me copy over to this, paste it right here, and this will be a minus. Let me add 2 buttons just so I can get a little bit of a feel of how this is working. So let me just add a button, add, and then I'll do one called remove. We're going to want to make this automated here in a second. Add and remove. On click, this will just be this dot add option, and then I'll bind this to this. That's so it has a reference to that, and then I'll just copy this over, and then call this remove option. Who did I mess up? So then let's see what I messed up. Okay, yeah, I forgot to copy over that. There we go. So if I click this, it should be able to add options, and then if I click this, it removes the options right there. Perfect. That's exactly what we want. We're utilizing what's known as virtual DOM with React here. You'll notice that it's not regenerating all of the options, it's only generating the brand new one. That's super handy. So it's not taking a long time, and it allows us to do something. In something like Angular, we really couldn't do something like this. We would have to append an option below the other option. Things could get messy, but with React, we're able to have this type of control. But this isn't ideally what we want. I'll go ahead and get rid of these 2 buttons just because that was for demonstration purposes. And let's do something. To these different options, we're going to want to do something special here. First, we're going to want to put an onFocus event. And this onFocus will have add option, right? And we'll define that here in a second. And onBlur, and onBlur is pretty much when you, okay, so onFocus is whenever you go inside or focus a certain element. In this case, it's the input. On blur is whenever you go outside, when you unfocus. So unfocus is another way of thinking of it, or going outside of this input in our case. So on blur would just be equal to remove option. There we go. The reason, you might be wondering, why don't we just put it directly on there? Well, we want to specify, depending on what it is, we're going to want to give it this value. So first, if option count, and I need to think about this logic a little bit in my head. So I want it to be, if it is the last one and we're focusing on it, then add another one. If it's the second to last one, because adding another one will put it into the second queue, we're going to want to remove it. And if it's not empty. Let me make sure of this. So if option count is, or if index, or if it is I is equal to, I'm trying to think about this logic here. I think if index is equal to option count, and I guess we got to define these let add option. It just initializes value, so it's at least undefined. Then let remove option. Forgot my semicolon there. So if it's equal to that, so if it is the last value in the row, then go ahead and make add option equal to this dot add option dot bind to this. And I'll do this. So if I go right there, okay, there we go. We'll see that anytime I click on that, it will add a new one, but it won't remove it whenever I go outside of it. That's not ideal. So now we're going to want a if statement for if index is equal to option count -1. So if it is the second to last one, because you'll see here, look, I click on that one, and now the one that we just clicked on is the second to last one. So if it is the second to last one, we're going to want to do remove option is equal to this remove option dot bind to this. And let's see how that pans out. So we'll see there we go. But pretty much no matter what, that's always going to get removed. We'll see we can never have this focus the second one, even if we put a value there. What we're going to want to say is if that current one has a value, then don't blur it, right? Don't get rid of it. And I need to think of the best way to do this. So what we could do is maybe go directly to these add functions, because again, I want to be able to be like, okay, what is my name? And we'll also see there's another thing. We'll see that it deleted that second option. That is not good. There we go. And I can't make any more than one option after I do that. Let's go ahead and fix that. So first on the remove function, so if, let's take out the value of const option count. And then here what we'll do is if option count, I guess, is greater than 2, then do the remove, else don't remove it. Let's try that. So if I go into the second one, it's not going to remove that anymore. Okay, so we solved our first problem, but again, this problem is still persisting. But again, it's good that we have the second option working. Now let's think about this logically. I guess, and let's target that last ref. So what we can do here is go ahead and say const last option is equal to, and this is going to change, so this dot ref, and then target that ref dependent on where it is. So if, I guess we're targeting that ref, and again we call the ref option, and then whatever that name is. So it would be option count -1. I think it might be -2. So let's try this. There we go. But we'll see that it can't find that of undefined. We're going to have to put this, I think, of -2 would make a little bit more sense. Although it can't find that. So let's see, this dot ref. Oh, refs is what it would be. There we go. So it's if this dot refs, although that is not finding it. That would be -1 in that instance. All right, let's console.log that out. Last option. Okay, so it would be the value of that. So we're trying to find the value of the last option, and we got to make sure it exists. I guess what we can do is a not equal to this, although that would technically not be ideal. If we just put it, okay, so if option 2 and it doesn't exist, that's what we need to say, and it doesn't exist, then remove it. There we go. Okay. So you'll see it removes if I don't type anything in there, but if I do have something in there, it will remove it. So what I'm saying here, I'm saying if the option count is greater than 2. So we never want it to be less than 2. That way, it doesn't make sense, or you're supposed to vote on one option. And then the second thing is if the last option, which it should be second to last option, I think that makes more sense because technically whenever it adds that new option, it becomes the second to last. Let me just, second last option. Again, I'm just trying to be semantically correct here. Is it won't do it, if I just don't do anything, it doesn't add that. So you can see how smooth this is. What is my name? Chris, Alex, Tim, and then again, if I go over here, don't enter anything, it's not gonna work. Perfect. Okay, we have it working really well. I'll go ahead and put these in here. We're going to want to do some validation in a little bit. That's something we're going to want to add to our CreatePoll. Speaking of CreatePoll, let's go ahead and do that. We'll make a button, and this will be a type of submit. And this will say CreatePoll. And then on here, we'll do an on submit of CreatePoll. Whoops. This dot CreatePoll dot bind to this. There we go, and then I'll create that method down here. So CreatePoll. That is actually the name of that. That should be fine. So this is gonna pass through an event. We're gonna have to do this a pretty special way because again, we got to think about it. We can take any number of options to our poll. You might be wondering how we're going to do this. Well, how we're going to do this is a for in loop. This is the way that I kind of came up with, is a for in loop, and we loop through our refs if they're not equal to question. First and foremost, we'll just prevent default. That way it doesn't refresh when we click that button. You'll notice it's not refreshing. Next thing we're going to want to do, I guess, is get out our values. So first we can get the question out of the ref. Is it refs? And then I'll just console.log that out to make sure that works. And then if I type something in there. Okay, yeah, so I need to get the value out of there. So if I do dot value, we'll see that this works with the question. There we go. Let me see what type of data structure Alex is looking for. So he's looking for a question. That's just a string, and then options, which is an array of options. Let me go ahead and define that data structure. So I'll make a constant of data, set that equal to question, and this question will be equal to question.value. And you know what I'll do? I'll actually do a trim, so that way it gets rid of any white spaces. Thank you, JavaScript. And then what I'll do is I'll make an options, but set it equal to a empty array. Yeah, that's what I'll do. Okay, so I'll set it equal to an empty array. Now what I'm gonna have to do is I'm gonna have to loop through my refs. That way I can see, and I'll walk you guys through this. Let me do a for options, or for const options option in this .refs, and I'll just console.log out the option. So it should give the properties on the ref when I click this. There we go. So we get the question, we get the option, and we get option 2. Then if I go over here, and I'll just create a couple more options here. So it should console.log all the way to 6 options. There we go. So we have a way of getting all of our values just by doing this for in loop. First, what we're going to need to do, so if this .refs option is not equal to question. So if it isn't the question property, then I'll console.log option. And again, I just want to test this out to make sure this works. Put some spaces behind here because it's getting mad at me. And it should, all it should do is console.log option 1 and option 2. But it is console.logging question. Okay, because that's because I need to do this. If option, not option the value, but option is equal to that. There we go. Gives me option 1, option 2. What I'm going to want to do here, and I can do some validation here in a second, but we'll worry about that. We'll separate that into a separate method. We'll do data.options.push this.refs option. Again, what this is doing is I'm targeting the data.options, which is an empty array. Then I'm pushing it. And then I'm targeting this.refs, and then whatever that property is. Oh, and then I'll need to do the value of that property. And after this for loop, I'll just console.log out data to see what it spits out. Let me do a simulated question. So what is your, what is the best beer? Let's do this. Dose, Bud Light, and then Miller. I don't know. Again, I don't have a great taste of beer, I guess. Click there. We'll see that it's given us 4 different arrays. So it's actually counting that of null as an array, or that of empty string as an array, but we can see it got all 3 of our values there. Something else we can add to this, so if not question, then I guess we can do an additional if statement. I guess we can do that. I can do that right here. So and this.refs. I'm trying to think of the best way to do this. If I could do option is not equal to empty string. I think I can do that and that would work. So something else, something to something 3, and then I click there. So it is giving me 4 options again. Okay, so that definitely doesn't work. This.refs is equal to that. So if option isn't equal to that, then I guess this is where we'll check this.refs option.value. Okay, that's what I didn't have. I didn't have the value. There we go. Keep messing up on that. I forget that. What is my name? I'm just again throwing C data. It only throws back 3 instead of the classic 2. That is very, very good. Here, I'll also do a trim. I could separate this out into a more of a readable value. In fact, I actually will. Value. That way I can say equal to this.refs option. And there we go, and then I can just push that in there just like that. And I'll walk you guys through this in case you're getting a little bit lost. So what is, whatever, I'll just do random values. It should only give me 4, because I only have 4 options filled out. There we go. So again, guys, just to walk you through this, what's actually happening here is if we're checking if the option name is not equal to question, because again, the only thing that isn't common here is the question refs. And if it isn't, then all of them should be equal to option 1, option 2, option 3, or however many options. Then we're looping through all those options and we're finding the specific value and pushing them into our options array. That way we have a very similar setup, or actually the exact same setup as Alex has in his post call. So that way when we post our data, it'll be perfectly ready on the server to accept that type of data. So it looks like we have this pretty much set up. I'll set up validation here in a second, but what I want to make sure is that we can get a create going. Let's go ahead and do this. I'm going to import jQuery from jQuery, and we can get started with our post call here. let me go ahead and say validation, because this is where we're going to do our validation. After we get finished with this, it's throwing me some errors. Does not allow comments. Okay, it has a space after there. There we go. And over here, we'll do an AJAX call. This AJAX call will take a URL or a method, which will be a post, then a URL, which should be right here. So it's -API-poll. Then it will take a data type or some type of JSON data, which will be our data, but we'll stringify it and pass in our data. So this will be whatever is spit out after this for loop. We'll do a data type, JSON, and then a content type of application-JSON. Fantastic. So in theory, this should work. Since last time it was messing up a little bit, I'll do an always call here. That way it console.logs something out. And I guess this will be given data. And I'll console.log the data out and see what it responds with. So it should respond with one of two things. And I'm going to want to write some sort of validation for the code. So what is my name? Chris, Alex, Jasmine. There we go. So we'll see that it created a poll with the ID of 4 because it responded with this object, and we'll see here that Alex actually states that. So on a status of 2.4, so we can actually do that. So if data.status is equal to 201, then we'll do something here. Then we'll do, I guess we'll do what's the other? If something went wrong, it returns a 500 if something went wrong, and that way we can do our error handling right there. Fantastic. And I'll just put the data inside of here. Have it log in both cases. But more importantly, let's go check. So that was an ID of 4. We'll see that it did create our poll. That's awesome. Let's actually go see if we can vote on that. So vote to 4. And obviously my name is Chris, so I'll vote. And it gives us a vote. So we got the whole create poll working. We have the voting function working, and we also have the result function working. But there's several things we're going to have to work on for the create poll. This probably isn't the best way to check this, but for now I think it'll do for our application. What we're going to want to do is redirect. So let me import something. You guessed it, I'll import that browser history from React Router. That way, when we create a poll, it'll redirect us. So I'll do browser history.push, and this push will be to, and it's data dot, what is that? Created poll ID. That way I can route to that created poll ID. So instead of console.logging this out, I'll actually just get that value out. So that equal to data. So I'll go to /v/ because we're going to want to bring them to the vote. We're not going to want to bring them to the poll because, again, chances are if they just created the poll, they haven't voted on it. Created poll ID. There we go. And then all I'll do is alert. There was a problem creating the poll. I don't know. I could. Again, when me and Alex go through this kind of this user interface and kind of making it a little bit nicer, that's something that we'll touch up on is better error handling. That way this doesn't say anything, and then I'll set that to window. To the window. There we go. All right. Let's try this once again. My name is not Chris, Alex, Tim. I don't know. So we'll see here. It threw an error. So my name is not. Searching the poll. So it isn't redirecting. We'll see that 5 over here. Let's see if that got created. That did create, but it did not send me to a poll, and I wonder why. So browser history.push /v/that isn't working. I wonder if we wrote something wrong. I don't believe we did, but we'll check. Make sure that this matches up. Sometimes I like just copy and pasting something that I know works for sure. And we'll see that that should have worked. I guess the status code, is it 200 or? Let's try the status code, something, I'll just make something random. Okay, so the status code it's responding with doesn't seem like it's hitting that if statement. You know, console.log, just data for right now, and we'll see what the issue is. Okay, so it doesn't return any status code if there is an error. That isn't good. Yeah. So what I'll do here is just kind of go around it, put that right up there so I can find that, and then I'll just return right here. So if there is an error, I'm hoping that that hits that that internal server error rather, and it won't ever run this push. But right there, it should work. There we go. Okay, so now it's working. We'll see the vote functionality is working as well. All right, guys, that's good. We've got the basic MVP of our application working, but again, there's several things people can break, such as right now I could write a question with no options in there, and it will throw an error. You'll see here it throws an error. Ooh, actually, it throws a 400 error instead of a 500 error. That is strange. So now this should... So post is equal to 400. Let me console.log that out. So again, I'm going to need some sort of way of being able to determine that that isn't working. So okay, I put data.state. Okay, status is what I needed to put. So if you guys are just viewing now, what I messed up on is it is status instead of state. Go over here, create this, it'll say there's a problem creating your poll, whatever, bad request. That's because, but we're going to want to do some sort of error catching. We're not going to want to give them that type of vague error catching. All right, so now for basic validation. Obviously, in a real production app, we'd want a little bit more robust, but all we're going to be doing is checking that object that we created. Now, let's make a new method called ValidatePoll. And over here, it will take actually the poll data, right? And what we're going to do is over here, before we start the AJAX call, right where we have this validation comment right here, this is where we're going to do the validation. So this dot validate poll, and then we'll just bind to this out of habit. And I guess what this will return, so this will return I guess an object, or more of a true false value. I think that's what'll make the most sense. And okay, it's not going to be a destruction. It's just going to be, what can we call this? Valid poll. So that's what we'll call it. So valid poll is what it will return, and this is going to throw an error right now if I do a create. And then what I'm going to say is if it's not a valid poll, then I'll return valid poll. That's what I'll return a string actually. So I'll alert valid poll. So what's going to happen here is if it's false, which I'll make it false if there are no errors, then it'll return false and this will never run. But if it is a valid, or it's not a valid poll, it's going to return this error that I'm going to go ahead and define. So let's go ahead and do this. We're passing in this data. So let me go ahead and pass in the poll data here. Or actually, it's just going to be called data, I guess. That's what it would be called. So first, what I'm going to check, I'll use console.log poll data. So if I hit create, it's going to throw an error, obviously, because it can't do that. And it'll say undefined. So if not undefined. And what I'll return false by default. So if I click this, that is going to return that. Actually, if this is true, that's when it'll turn it. That makes a lot more sense. So this won't ever return. There's a problem creating the poll. It'll just hit that one error because, again, it has no question, has no options, but we don't want to hit that. We want it to hit our own custom validation. So I'll do poll data In fact, what I'll do is I'll get out the question. Whoops, question, and then options from our poll data. Then I'll write if statement. So if question isn't, if question.length isn't greater than 8, so we'll give it a minimum characters of 8, we'll say, we'll just return question must be more than 8 characters. There we go. Then we'll do another if options.length is less than 2. Less than or equal to, okay, no, yeah, if it's less than 2, so if it's 1 or 0, then we're going to return two options at least are, okay, I can word this so much better. Trying to think of how I can word this. 2 options are required. There we go. I could probably, again, whenever we go through our UX and UI video, we're going to be doing so much better than this. And if this doesn't hit any of that, it'll just return false. Now, I could not put false and it would be undefined. It would never hit this, but I think putting false there would be a little bit better, just to give it more of error catching. So if I click there, we'll see 2 options are required. All right, so it's not hitting this length. It should be hitting this length. So question.length. Okay, it must not be less than 8. There we go. So question requires 8 characters, and if I go over here, and obviously that's more than 8 characters, and I click that, it'll say 2 options required. And again, if I do this, it'll still say 2 options required, and if I do this, it should create the poll. There we go. Validation, it's very kind of makeshift, but we'll see that it still works for our use case right here, and we'll want to make this a lot more robust. But again, the validation is working. You can't submit a poll without a question or at least 2 options. I want to correct a couple mistakes that I made. Over here, I saw that I just alert, please select an option, but what I need to do here is return, because if I don't return it, it'll go ahead and run through this entire function, which is not what we want. But the last thing I want to do is, we were saying that we wanted to do a not found page. So let's go ahead and set that up. So we'll go over here and create not found page.jsx. And again, if they hit a route that does not exist, we're going to want to redirect them to this. We'll just go over here and copy this, just make it a little bit easier. Get rid of that content, and we'll call this page not found. And I'll rename it to, not found page. There we go. I'll go import it in my router file, and I'll put it right below the layout just to keep consistency. I'll go to the shared not found page from modules dash shared dash not found page. .jsx. Perfect. And basically what we want to reference is similar to what we did in the server file. We're just going to say all paths that aren't defined, and then just load that component. Let me just copy that. Yeah. Page, not found page. There we go. So once this refreshes, we'll just go ahead and go to a route that we know for a fact doesn't exist, and we'll go to this not found page. All right. Now, finally, what I want to do is I want to make it look a little bit user-friendly. I know earlier in the video I said that me and Alex are going to be doing the styling together, but again, we're going to have this live for a short period of time, as it is, and I don't like the aspect of having black borders and there's no clear delineation between segments. So I'm going to go ahead and fast forward this, and I'm just going to be doing basic Bootstrap styling. So let's get started. Actually, probably turn on some music.
Light as a feather when I'm floating through, reading through the daily news, measuring the hurt within the golden rule. Centimeters of ether, I'm heating the speaker. Motivational teacher with words that burn people. Singing the headlines, lined with discord. It's either genocide or the planet in uproar. Never good. The rules in paradise are never nice. The best laid plans of mice and men are never right. I'm just a vagabond with flowers for Algernon, an average Joe who knows what the fuck is going on. It's the hope of my thoughts that I travel upon. Fly like an arrow of God until I'm gone. So drifting away like a feather in air, letting my words take me away from the hurt and despair. So I'm keeping it vertical, forever elevator, riding the escalator to the something that is greater. So I'm drifting away like a feather in air, letting my soul take me away from the hurt and despair. So I'm keeping it vertical, forever elevator, riding the escalator to the something that is greater.
Taking chances, word tap dancing with wolves in an ice arena out there deep in the woods of Arizona. The sun be out, life's ironic, ain't it? Trying to be Dali when I write surreal life, I painted vivid. Habitat crazy, insane. Watching propaganda, 6 o'clock, news and insane. Cultures clash, poor black folk and white trash. They rebel in the cyberspace and might crash. Dash to millennium, a million miles are running. At the speed of now, bound, no return gunning. Rambo style, gun hold, child gunning. Ambo plow, 2 times loud, stunning. Stunning, when it hits ya, lift you off the earth like, hey yo, take you right back to earth. And niggas wonder why, they might wonder why this shit might happen, but it does. It go
Drifting away like a feather in air, letting my words take me away from the hurt and despair. So I'm keeping it vertical, forever elevator, riding the escalator to the something that is greater. So I'm drifting away like a feather in air, letting my soul take me away from the hurt and despair. So I'm keeping it vertical, forever elevator, riding the escalator to the something that is greater. Treat you better than me, cause that's the heavenly key to unlock the inner strength. What my essence will be, it's the knowledge of self, understanding of the things around me that becomes the wisdom that I need. Living this life to the best of my ability, channeling energy to my thoughts, attain symmetry. Remember me, because my prose remain gold. I got the gift of gab like them pimps and cane goals. It never ends, I keep it rolling like a cipher. The first caveman bringing fire, innovating it higher. To plasma states, I raise the stakes. It's double or nothing in this vacuum of space. I will survive divine to time to cry. Fuck a hold or hide, I'm alive for pride. And I drove the Chevy to the levee, but the levee was dry. Singing this.
Okay, guys, I think that pretty much covers it. I mean, we got a decent looking poll. It's a lot better than what it was, but again, I think when me and Alex knock this out and kind of have a clearer plan, and it's not like 20 minutes of styling, it'll look a lot better. So let me just walk you through what I got. What is my name? And I'll just say Chris, Alex, Nick, Tim, whatever. And then over here, you can see that I just kind of laid it out, made it a little bit more prominent. Before it had the ID, which, I mean, the user really doesn't care about the poll ID. It has the cast vote button that looks really good. My name is Chris, so I'll cast the vote, and we'll see here that I just put Wells here from Bootstrap just to give it, again, more distinction and more separation so you can visually see. Ideally, what me and Alex want to do is, get a graph here that would show a little bit more information about, who's getting voted on. But I think for that will be definitely covered in the styling video when we get to that. But for right now, I think this is good and ready for launch. There'll probably be a couple more errors if I see them arise, because again, it's been a long 2 hours here, and I know you guys are eager to see it online. So if you guys go to andvote.com, hopefully by the time of this video it will be up, and you guys can start creating your own polls and sending them to your friends, or even just testing out what we built. All of this code, again, will be posted directly to GitHub, which you guys can do a pull request anytime. We'll be more than happy to review your code and potentially even push some of your designs or some of your features that you make onto the actual live site. But until then, I'm Chris Pena, and I like puppies.
NY Factory.